This episode of United Hour is sponsored by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Lads, it's time to gear up and get yourself the gift of shaving this holiday season. I'm talking about the Manscaped Perfect Package 2.0. You don't want to use the same trimmer on your face as you're using on your balls. That's just nasty. That's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. Their lawn mower has proprietary skin-safe technology, so this trimmer won't nick or snag your nuts. Manscaping accidents are finally a thing of the past. Manscaped also has the Crop Preserver, an anti-chafing deodorant and moisturizer. You already put deodorant on your armpits, so why aren't you putting deodorant on the smelliest part of your body? So go over to manscaped.com and you can get 20% off and free shipping from their entire range with the code BIGHEADS. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code BIGHEADS, BIGHEADS. Always use the right tools for the job. Your balls will thank you.
The shout now. Well done, Bobby Johnson. Well done, Manchester United. Beckham. Into Sheringham. And Solskjaer has won it. Bobby Saab saved it. United again. Ready.
Hello listener, welcome to the official redcafe.net podcast on all things Manchester United. United. This week I'm joined by Raess, who's become a regular on the United Hour, and long-time want-away Alex.
Hello!
Welcome back, Alex.
I know, it's been some time.
Yeah, you're like Pogba, I think, one of the OGs, been there since the start.
Been wanting away for a while, but it doesn't look like it's happening, so yeah.
Yeah, looking for a January transfer to football week.
Show my face, get myself in the shop window, if anyone's listening, hit me up.
Any big bids, we don't want them. We don't want them anymore. Reece, how are you?
I'm fine. Could be better. Today's game didn't quite go to plan. I banked on a United win today. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was predicting that affair, although maybe we were, Alex. Starting before we rip into the disaster that was today, we're recording on Sunday evening, but we're looking back firstly at AZ. So we had AZ on Thursday and drew with them, I believe, 2-2 in the first leg in Holland, possibly. But we had a resounding 4-0 win in the second half of this game. Reece, did you see any of it?
I've caught the highlights. It's the first game I've not been able to watch the full 90 minutes of. But I've seen the goals, seen the build up to the goals. So yeah, depending on the question, I might be able to answer it.
Well, the first half was entirely forgettable. It looked like two teams who knew 0-0 would see them both go through, and both teams were qualified by virtue of other results. So it was a bit of a dead rubber. And Ole started a lot of youth players, which was great to see, but the occasion was pretty damp in the first half, but credit to him, because we may get some credit in for Ole early in this podcast because there won't be a whole pile of it being handed out later, but big response in the second half, and we had, I think it was a young top corner finish from the sort of right of the box after Mata had done some great work along with Pereira in the sort of left hand corner of the box. Really was quite a nice goal. And then we had a sort of Greenwood snapshot, which is becoming a bit of a trademark. Greenwood then won the penalty for Mata and then finished off a fantastic performance from him, which we'll touch on later, with another very, very sharp finish from the sort of right-hand side of the box on his left foot. That team had only conceded 8 in their respective league. So, AZ Alkmaar, not a massive joke, but we're through at sort of a canter into the Europa League, and the next round of the draw is tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, I believe. So happy with that, Reece. Obviously we expect to go through in the Europa League, but it's been fairly comfortable whilst also seeing a lot of youth.
No, it's been a brilliant campaign, I think, so far from the Europa League perspective. I think it gives us an alternative route into Champions League football. It's not something that should be sniffed at. And the great thing is that it's been utilising players who wouldn't normally feature in the first team. So we're not over-exerting ourselves from an energy perspective on both these side-by-side campaigns of the Premier League and Europe. It seems so far that we've been sailing through in the Europa League with the weaker squad, which is how it should be done. So credit to Ole for being able to achieve that.
Alex, you haven't been on in a while, so I suppose we've been going over most weeks these kind of young players that we're hoping are going to save us from this current predicament that we find ourselves in. But is there anyone that kind of sticks out for you in terms of that crop? Obviously Greenwood, but beyond him, because we will come on to that later, is there anyone there that kind of really impresses you, or that you think is maybe ready to step in, or do you see them all as still a while away?
I take away at this point no longer counting McTominay as part of that group, right? He's well established.
Yeah, 100%. Jesse Lingard is still in contention though.
Up and coming.
You have a young Jesse Lingard, right? Yeah, sure. In all honesty, probably and possibly not. At the start of the season, I was incredibly excited to see Gomez. You know, we were teased him in pre-season, and he looked, you know, if not exactly what we need, at least someone who, in games where there isn't a great deal going on, you can persist through 90 minutes of not a great deal for little moments of magic from, you know, short, stumpy, incredibly skillful players. Yeah. And we haven't got that, which has been really disappointing. Beyond that, and Greenwood probably not, but I think maybe we need to remember that, you know, youngsters actually making it in the Premier League, never mind a club like Manchester United, is incredibly, incredibly difficult. Like, the odds are stacked up against them massively, and I think we put too much pressure on expecting a lot of players to come through, and maybe some of that's down to the fantastic records that we have, which I'm sure we'll come on to shortly. Garner, from the few times I've seen him, looks like an interesting player, potentially someone who's dependable and reliable enough and mature at a younger age, similar to McTominay, that despite maybe not having the necessary talent that you might expect to require, has the head and the mentality and personality that he could become some form of squad player for us. But beyond that, probably not, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think it was actually a bit of a mixed bag from a lot of them. Garner looked good in patches, but ultimately I think it sort of brought a lot of people back down to earth on that front in terms of, and I know I myself said we should have started him in midfield instead of Pereira, but that probably says more about Pereira than it does about Garner. But also Tuanzebe was the one I think that got a little bit of flack for his performance, a lot of wayward passing and just not looking totally dominant. But I think people have, as you've mentioned, just sky high expectations for these players, because we love to see them come through as such a huge part of the DNA of the club that I think we almost force it, or certainly as fans we clamour for it more than is perhaps wise. But Tuanzebe kept a clean sheet and everyone was saying he was crap, and that, you know, there's a good reason why he's not displacing Lindelof, which I think that was a very common thought prior to those games, that he should be doing that. So we'll not toil on AZ, and there is something in there that we want to pick up on. So both that game against AZ and then this game against Everton today was the 4,000th game in a row where United have named an academy player, I believe, on the matchday squad. I think that was the record. And it's just absolutely incredible. It kind of flew under the radar for me a wee bit, because it's always mentioned, you know, it's mentioned like periodically every few weeks, just that we always have this, you know, that every time there's an academy player there, it's sort of, there's a vague allusion to this, but I didn't know we were coming up on such a huge number. So that actually dates back to 1937 when the first academy player, that unbroken sort of chain of team sheets, which is just, I mean, it's insane. I was trying to Google it to see if there was any other club, and I'm sure there are in maybe other leagues or other countries in smaller spotlights, as it were, but I can't think of anyone else, you know, at the top edge of football who can boast such a record. Like, it's absolutely incredible, Raess.
I'm surprised that Ajax, for example, wouldn't be, maybe not 1937, but say 1960s onwards, able to share a similar sort of record, or perhaps Barca. But
yeah, Barca were according to my thought. Yeah,
but for English football, we're notoriously conservative and tend to prioritise experience over risking with youth. I think that's why Manchester United are such a special club, not just in English football, but world football. It's that association they have with youth, the daring, the courage, the flair of young players, because they take risks that older players just wouldn't do. I think that's what represents Manchester United in a nutshell. It's a key principle which is enshrined within the values of the club. So it's something I hope doesn't just stop at 4,000, it goes on indefinitely.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I was thinking about today is it's never felt like a token gesture. You know, it's never felt to me that the managers thought...
Do you see Rashford today?
Yeah,
I'm joking.
well,
I'm joking. Of course.
Yeah, but and we'll get to that later with some stats. But it's never felt to me that it's been something that's been protected. It's just felt natural. It's never felt to me that Ole or Mourinho or anyone else has thrown in a team sheet.
It wasn't even recognised, I think, until the last few years. Like I can't remember who it was, but I believe that there was a couple of United fans who published a book and went and did the research to consider how far back it's been that we've had an academy player in the matchday lineup, and
it really
it's only since then that, like you say, it's been constantly brought up and resurfaced. But for 60, 70, maybe even 80 years, it wasn't a known thing. Yeah, it was just organically done and happened. Yeah. And I think the more interesting stat, which actually now I'm about to repeat it, I'm somewhat sceptical of, but what I've read in multiple places is that it's something like 289 players in that time, but that's almost exactly, or maybe even exactly 50% of the players we've had at the club in that time.
Yeah, I had heard said, and I thought to myself, impossible. There's no way 50% of our players could have been, because it seems mind-boggling, but I think it's true. Another I thought quite impressive stat is that if you look at our top 5 appearance makers, they're all academy graduates. So Giggs, Charlton, Folks, Scholes, and Nev. Mm-hmm. So those are the top 5 custodians of Manchester United football.
And 3 of those 5 in the last 20 years in a period where there was a hell of a lot of money and we were incredibly successful, which says it all. It's not like this is a club who's had this tradition but as a result has suffered. It's a team who have had this tradition and being the most successful club in Britain as a result.
Yeah, and it's a nice pick me up, particularly on a day like today when I was certainly struggling with Manchester United Football Club on general, and it's a nice kind of leveler just to realise, because I think we all go through this kind of existential football fan crisis where we think, oh God, are we actually just Liverpool now? Is this just our 20-year barn run? Are we only special in our own heads? Are we really too big to fail, or are we not? And you go all through these, kind of trials and tribulations thinking on that, but ultimately there is a lot of really special things there that you sort of can cling on to and that are worth, I think, celebrating, and that certainly is one of them.
Yeah.
To bring it up to the present day, in terms of Ole's squad, he's had 12 in his current first team squad are academy graduates, which is an extremely high number, obviously. Mm-hmm. We've had the Premier League's youngest 11 this year, when we beat Brighton 3-1, and also I think 31 out of our 35 goals scored this year have either been scored directly or assisted by an academy graduate. So, it's very much alive and well in the current squad as well, Raess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we knew when Ollie was coming in that he was going to champion that cause.
It's a great finish again. I think it's pretty similar to his goal in midweek, to be honest. He's a special talent. He's a young boy. He's working hard in training. He needs to keep his head down, not get carried away, and I'm sure he's going to have a big future for this club, and we're lucky to have him.
Greenwood. Mason Greenwood hits the spot. It's the substitute who's come to Manchester United's rescue.
He can finish right through the legs. Classic Solskjaer.
On a similar tangent then, I just want to speak a little bit about Greenwood, obviously. I mean, he had the 2 brace in midweek and then has absolutely dug us out tonight, or this afternoon, I should say. And, I mean, he just looks phenomenal. I mean, I see such a Van Persie mould in him, and the sharpness and the ability. I mean, Alex, he just looks absolutely clinical and fantastic. What did you make of his week for United?
Oh, it's absolutely massive, right? And, not only did he get the 2 goals against AZ, but also won the penalty, right?
Yeah.
The Mata then converted, so, it's a bit of a shame he wasn't given that one, really, and could have gone for his first career hat-trick. But yeah, he's I think, 3rd youngest Premier League scorer at Old Trafford for us. I mean, in fairness, the names ahead of him, Makeda and Welbeck, didn't go on to have the most successful careers, but he's already our 2nd highest scorer this season after Rashford. He's got more goals than Martial, which, again, maybe says something about Martial, and that's a conversation for later in the day, because, Greenwood totally deserves his moment, and he's just got that nose for goal, right? He as cliche as it is, he knows where the goal is, but he's just so capable at hitting the net and hitting the corners and making sure that it's out of the keeper's way. And he's incredibly composed for someone who's coming onto the pitch at such a young age, and he's not getting the 3rd or 4th goal in a United romp. He's getting a goal that puts us back in the match, and that alone is something to really tough your hat to. So yeah, he's had an incredible week, and he looks like he could go on to big things. He just needs to build up that full-grown man strength, was it? I think from a few weeks ago. I think that needs some time to develop, and I think maybe his ability to impact a game outside of the goals a little bit more. And both those things aren't things that you would expect at a man of such a young age. So yeah, fair fucks to him, and incredibly excited to see where he goes from here.
Yeah, he's sort of trademarking this bottom corner, just cutting it off the left finish, that he also seems to love to strike a ball through defenders' legs. He's not worried about trying to beat a man 7 ways up. Everything's an economy of movement. He'll do a step over to buy a yard, and then he'll put it almost sort of intelligently or purposefully kind of through the defenders, unsighting the goalkeeper, and it's just tucking into the corner every time, and they just look identical. You could show those 3 goals, and you would just think, oh yeah, he's just done the exact same thing 3 times from 3 slightly different areas of the box. It's fantastic to see. I saw another stat. He was, I think, the 3rd youngest player ever to score a brace in the Europa League, or in Europe maybe even, and the 2 above him were, if anyone can guess.
Well, in the Europa League.
Yeah, I believe
Rashford.
It was Europa League. Rashford, and I think the one above that was Rooney, which makes me think it was actually in Europe total, but that was what TalkSport were saying anyway. So another very good Manchester United tradition. So I mean, he's just so positive at the moment that it almost, he's almost making the case for a first team spot. Yes. Or do you think that's too soon?
I don't think it's too soon. It's just a very difficult conversation because that front 3 plus Greenwood, it's I think Rashford, definitely has confirmed himself on the left now. James, I think, is so pivotal in terms of our build-up play. He brings so much energy to the team. So it's almost a Martial v Greenwood conversation now for that number 9 spot.
Well, I think it can also be a Greenwood versus Jesse Lingard conversation. I think,
that's an interesting.
Particularly in games, we saw, and this week is such a great example of it because we saw Spurs and City, Jesse Lingard have 2 extremely good games after a very difficult time for him at the club. We've seen Pereira in big games have extremely functional performance for us as a pressing 10 and a counter-attacking 10, which is great, and they're both brilliant at that. What we consistently see is that when teams play more defensively, sit in against us, that they are essentially a spur part and completely lacking in anything positive or anything incisive, and that really hampers us and slows us down to the point where I think, why do we insist on playing 4-2-3-1 with such focus on the 10 and such weight on the 10 shoulders when it doesn't actually suit the players we have? If it was Paul Pogba, it was back, I could totally understand it. If he is going to be a good 10, which I still think remains to be seen, a lot of people are putting a lot on Paul's shoulders that basically you can't criticise Ole because as soon as Paul comes back, we'll be brilliant because that'll be the perfect 11. And I don't just think that's going to be the case. But if, today we set up at a 4-2-2-2, essentially, and played Greenwood up top of Martial, Rashford off the left, James off the right, and Scotty, Tuhati, and Fred holding, I think there's every chance. It's a more positive setup. But with the work rate of James, I think, and the work rate of Rashford, I think you're absolutely fine defensively. And I just think they can't possibly offer less than Jesse Lingard today in the 10. What do you make of that, Alex? Do you think that's a possibility, or am I being too optimistic with that?
No, I think that's a fair comment. It's quite clear that Lingard shares this notion with United themselves as a team that he's better when he's against a team who has a lot of the ball, and ultimately it's a case of perspiration over inspiration with him, right? He runs a lot, and
where'd you get that from?
No idea. He works, not me, obviously. Yeah, not an original thought. He works tirelessly, and he's an intelligent presser, and he will run his socks off, and they are qualities that are needed, particularly in those big games. But when you've got a team who are focusing on the low block, then there's much less impact that comes with that, and you do need someone who has the vision and has the quality and is composed enough that when those few moments that you get against a team who have the low block to really make a difference, whether that's with a finish or a slide through pass, you need someone who's got the ability to take those, and he unfortunately really doesn't. I do think that there are other opportunities. There's definitely question marks over Martial, and also Daniel James. For me, there aren't many players who've come into United that you can so immediately just fall in love with, right? He's this young kid. He went through one hell of a summer. He's had to step up to the Premier League, and he's just class. He's just, top lad. Seems incredibly genuine. Works really hard, and I love that. But he's going to need a break at some point, right?
100%.
He's playing a hell of a lot of football. And, for a team who are in the Europa League, which is notoriously difficult when it comes to travel commitments and whatnot, we probably are going to need to see a bit more rotation naturally anyway on that front. So, I definitely think there's a case for him. And I agree on the Pogba point and the 4-2-3-1, because for me, Pogba's best when he's got the game in front of him. I find it strange that people want to put him into a role where, for me, he would probably be playing with his back to goal. And, for me, if Pogba's coming back into the team, you should really start considering, having a three-man midfield with McTominay as the centre of it, rather than just sticking him at number 10.
It remains to be seen, obviously, what will happen with that. We're all assuming that'll be the case just based on Fred and McTominay's form, but there probably is a good argument that we go straight to 4-3-3 when he comes back, but you just don't know. Raess, obviously getting into the nitty gritty of today, it was an unchanged lineup in regards to our last Premier League game. As we just mentioned, the 4-2-3-1 with Lingard in the 10 row, everything else as you would expect. Obviously, Williams played the 90 minutes midweek, so I think everyone rightly knew that Shaw was going to come back in, and that was probably one of the only debatable positions. I thought first 30 we were okay. What did you make of the game in general, particularly the first half?
Okay, so first 30, I thought first 10 we were struggling. I thought Richarlison in particular was giving us a bit of problems, but then we settled into the game. Funnily enough, before the goal, we were the dominant team. I thought Fred in particular was very influential, dominating the midfield, making sure we were on the front foot. But Martial was struggling throughout the entire game to make any impact, and I think the lack of any incisiveness by the front three during that period of domination was what cost us, because we weren't actually hurting them while we were dominating, and then they just went off the other side and managed to get the goal, and suddenly there was pressure on us and we were having to play catch up.
See, in terms of that front three lacking incision, as you say, that's obviously the case. I mean, Rashford was cutting the classic forlorn Rashford figure of trying things that weren't working and then constantly trying instead of maybe making better decisions. As you say, Martial, a little bit of nice hold-up play and touches here and there, but just not in the game. And James kind of industrious, but nothing, I would say. Why is that though? Is that their fault? Is that the midfield's fault? Is it the centre-backs and full-backs?
There's two main factors. One is the coaching staff, because it's a persistent issue from a coaching perspective. And secondly, it's the nature of the players themselves, which you touched upon, I think, last podcast, where or was it Ashwin, where we spoke about how that counter-attacking style is so well suited to the nature of the players that we have. They're quite kick and rush players. They love having space in front of them to just run into, and when they have to make very instinctive decisions on the counter, they're fine. But when they have to use a bit of guile and actually have to think about how to craft opportunities when space is tighter and against a low block, they run out of ideas.
Yeah.
Suddenly they're moving into positions where there's already a man marking that space, and there's no ingenuity of how to interlink, create overlaps, change rotation of positions, etc., etc. You look at a team like United and compare it to, say, PSG when they're up against a low block, or Liverpool or Man City, and there's a world of difference in terms of the footballing brain being shown. And I don't want to blame the players just yet, because they're all quite young. So for me, it has to then go on to the coaching staff, because this is clearly an issue that's been going on throughout the entire season. We're clearly a team that can turn up in the big games.
Yeah.
So why has this situation not been rectified, where we just look more penetrative against smaller teams, against low blocks?
There's a few things to touch on there, because, there are a lot of teams who are much, much better against the low block. Obviously, right?
Nearly all of them.
Well, yeah, exactly. But the thing is, those teams have a much less of an over-reliance on their front three than we have. They are able to, City today, a fantastic brace from De Bruyne, right? You've got full-backs at Liverpool, Trent Alexander-Arnold's only a couple of assists away from Paul Scholes' career records.
Current best playmaker in the Premier League, I would say.
Yeah, and our reliance is purely on those front three who are just constantly running into brick walls. And I would also question, it's not only like the characteristics and makeup of those players and where their qualities lie, which is obviously a very fair comment, but I also think that it's as much a case of personality. And, the player, I guess, that I would particularly call into question on that front would be Martial, who, for me, has all the talent in the world, but doesn't have the personality required to really make it as a number 9, but also at a top club. Because for me, Martial is absolutely fantastic when things are going well for him, but he wants the ball to his feet. He wants it in a certain place. He's not really interested in getting involved beyond that and really grafting for a goal. And I just think that there's a lack of tireless bravery from him. He's not constantly running it behind. He's not making... he's not sacrificing himself with those runs and that movement needed, which can help bring other players into the game, which can help stretch a defence, which can help, cause mistakes from them as well. And can
you imagine Tony Martial's ability on Jamie Vardy's personality and shithousery? I mean,
exactly,
the best
right?
In the world. But even Mane, I think is an example I always look at is someone who managed to couple the two, because his tight, close control is as good as anyone's. I mean, Messi voted for him for the Ballon d'Or and said he's the player he loves to watch. Honestly, in terms of wriggling out of sort of tight situations, his close control, his general quality, he's up there with the very best. And yet he is one of the most industrious, hard-working players that you're ever likely to see as well. And I think it's a good point. And I don't want to just jump on Martial because people will, just turn around and go, but Rashford was also crap. And I'll just go, look, we'll get to that. But he is still frustrating, and obviously he's had very good moments as a number 9 this year so far, but also he's had the injury and then a lot of just very just not really involved. Does enough, nice touches. His hold-up play is fantastic when he is bothered, kind of thing, but it's just not enough. And as you say, he looks to me like a player who just needs to be dropped into Barcelona's team and he'd look class. Do you know what I mean? Like, if he just had a bubble of brilliant players around him and we always had the ball, drop him into City's team. I don't think he works hard enough for Pep, but I bet you he looks brilliant, or certainly better than what he does now, because he needs a team, I think, that's going to keep possession 60-70%, that's going to step right into the opposition half so that our centre-backs are really in their half, keep them penned in and just plays. And I think you would see a lot more from him. But it's now looking, it is hard to kind of envisage him really setting on fire and being the player that we all know he can be, at United. So it is very difficult at the moment to kind of square that one away.
100%. And I guess that is where the biggest frustration lies, because he's got the ability, clearly, but just not the real... It's not like a want or need thing. It's just, that knowledge that sacrificing himself for the team will ultimately result in more goals for himself. And I think the comparison with Rashford is obvious and easy to make, but the differences are night and day. Where they both have a poor game, Rashford will never shy away. He will always continue to work hard, to make runs in behind. And it just doesn't always come off for him. But Martial's a different case. He goes into his shell. He doesn't really move. He starts to sulk a little bit. And yeah, it's just not good enough, unfortunately.
In terms of what Raess, you remarked on earlier, just about that it is the makeup of those front three, but also the coaching. To me, we do put a lot in the front three, as we should, but it's very much that kind of Jose Mourinho. I set up 8 players and then I just let my front 2 do whatever, it's that kind of, we'll work on everything up until a certain point, and the final third, hey, that's just you guys. You just need to go out there and express yourself. And that's great when you have Eden Hazard. I don't really accept that, and I sort of struggle when people just say, oh, well, we were bad today because of Jesse Lingard. Like, Jesse Lingard was bad today, but there was 10 other players on the pitch who were equally as bad, and this is where I come back to Ole and the coaching team. I look at our fullbacks, and I just think we let ourselves down so much. And I actually thought, Shaw was okay today. Aaron Wan-Bissaka defensively was fantastic. I've never seen someone so confidently smash someone inside the box 3 times in a row. I actually felt really bad for Richarlison by the end of it, because it was just a little bit almost embarrassing, and I was convinced he was going to give away a penalty, but he never did. But Raess, how much does the lack of an overlapping, a quality fullback, a ball-playing fullback, or just having the run there as a support and as a means to get to the byline? When do United get to the byline? Did we get there once today?
Barely.
Genuinely in behind. Wan-Bissaka, I remember got there once. Daniel James got there maybe once in sort of counter situations. It shouldn't be that hard. You should be able to get there even when they have 8 men back, if your passing's any good. Surely that's a coaching issue. Surely that's a team issue that we're just not playing the ball in an effective enough way to kind of carve team open when they just sit back, you know?
It's a coaching issue, it's a philosophical issue, it's a transfer issue. And I think, Alex, you made some really good points there in the sense that you can't just blame the front three because you mentioned Trent Alexander-Arnold. I mean, that assist record, phenomenal. You mentioned De Bruyne getting goals from midfield. All extremely valid and intelligent points. Our midfield, when Pogba's not in the team, there's no real goal threat from that midfield. But even when you do have Pogba in the team, has he been consistent enough to the level of a De Bruyne as a goal threat? Not in my opinion. He has streaks in him, but he's not a regular goal threat. But then,
funnily enough, in fairness, sorry to cut him, but I saw a stat this week that surprised me that I can't remember in the last however many long, maybe since Pogba joined United, in the same amount of games as De Bruyne, he's only got, I think it's 5 goals and assists less before today, that was.
Yeah, and that's probably true.
It's very surprising.
But Pogba gets a lot of penalties. I'm not even sure, does De Bruyne take penalties for City? I don't think he does.
I don't think he does. But
he doesn't.
But it's still a valid point from Alex in the sense that talent-wise, Pogba's not that far behind De Bruyne in terms of being able to score that many goals. And the next point I was going to go on to was the team's not set up in a way where we're maximising Pogba's attacking talent, because he does have the talent to maybe even surpass De Bruyne in terms of goal threat. We're just not setting up the team in a way where our fullbacks can get numerous assists and contribute to goals, where our midfielders, it shouldn't just be Pogba, there should be another one in there who's able to get goals. I mean, we mentioned De Bruyne, but when Silva's at his best.
Yeah. I mean, Gundogan, I think, can barely get in that Man City team, and every time he does, he does something positive in terms of a goal or assist, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, compare Foden's impact to Andreas Pereira. I mean, Foden barely gets any minutes, but when he does play, he looks dangerous, like a threat. Whereas, and I think playing in that Man City system obviously helps him massively, because if you put Foden as a squad player into the United team, when he gets his 10, 15 minutes or whatever, he wouldn't look like scoring a goal or getting an assist in the way. We're just so static. We rely on the front three to do a lot, basically.
And I think the important point to make here is that, I mentioned 2 fantastic players in De Bruyne and Alexander-Arnold, and who are playing at, top clubs, but also there are plenty of examples of teams who have, on paper, players of a similar or lesser quality than United. Look at Leicester, for example, the goals and assists that they're getting from midfield. Look at Chelsea with Mount earlier in the season. Like, there are plenty of examples out there. And, like, for me, football in the modern era, and, particularly at the highest of levels, to some degree, attacking has become a form of a science, and then, individual flair and brilliance can play off that fantastically. But City and Liverpool carve teams open with consistent patterns of play. You win the ball here, you make this one, you do that, and you would naturally, if you've done your research on the opposition, you should be able to come to expect what they're likely to do, and it should become quite routine in a manner that you're able to open up the opposition. And we never see any of that. Ollie's been at the club for a year now, and I can't compare 2 games and go, actually, I can see what we're trying to do there, when we're winning the ball back in this set, other than, we win the ball back deep and, we're playing a team who, and it's just everyone just fucking charge forward, do what you got to do. As Raess said earlier, don't really think about it, just play off instinct, use that killer instinct, which those front 3 players have. But outside of that, what is there? Like, I never noticed, either during a game or from game to game, consistent and similar patterns of play that are clearly being developed.
In answer to the question, what is there? I think on current evidence, not a whole lot, basically. Coming back to the game, obviously, then, we were doing okay, not that great, but then they got that sucker punch OG. Raess, is that a foul?
I think in the strictest interpretation, yes. But I think it's a bit, if we're talking old school, it's a bit soft. I think the keeper should be showing more domination of that situation.
Without VAR, it's never given, right? That's the thing for me.
What do you think? But like with VAR, do you think once you saw the VAR and you were sitting there watching it, Alex, what did you say? That shouldn't be a goal, or did you say, man?
I thought it was a goal.
No, I think it probably is a foul. It would have been a little bit harsh, but I think it is a foul. You got the hands in the keeper's face, and we've now got VAR and should take advantage of VAR. It's a foul, but it can be both a foul, but also it shouldn't have ever been an issue, and De Gea should have done so much better. Right, those two things can align, and and De Gea. VAR's come into place this season, right? If we were in our 30th season of VAR and players knew that, keepers knew that they would always have that protection and any hand in their face would mean that, but he hasn't had that. This is the first season where that's been the case. So, he should be clearing that, and there's no excuse. And it's been a consistent and persistent problem that De Gea's had for years now. And, there was a period where I thought he'd put it to bed, but then I just noticed that he wasn't coming for balls that other keepers would be.
Yeah, definitely. He just doesn't. He doesn't even when the ball's on the floor. Say someone gets slipped in behind and we're playing the high line, he's even reluctant to come in that situation. Never mind when the ball's in the air, which obviously he has a serious historical problem with. But I just thought it was. I thought it was a shambles. I thought it was an absolute awful bit of play from him. The ball's his all day long when that ball comes in.
100%.
Both Calvert-Lewin and is it Yerry Mina that goes up with him, or who is it? I think it was Yerry Mina. Both of them are yards away and running. Calvert-Lewin's not even being marked. And Wan-Bissaka has two players to mark and stays with the one that doesn't run, which is a bit of a cop-out. But the zonal marking thing was completely off. He jumps and De Gea jumps into him, turning his back, and De Gea's already a step or two behind. De Gea's last of the party. Those two players get there before De Gea, and he comes late. It's just poor all over. He then goes with a little chocolate wrist, turning his back, and okay, when you slow it down on VAR, it looks like he's been absolutely elbowed in the face, but actually in real time, it's not a big contact. He doesn't hold his head, he doesn't even go down, he just kind of falls with his back turned and watches the ball trickle in and then looks upset. I thought it was absolutely shocking. I thought it was extremely poor.
It was, yeah, very, very poor.
He's a player that I just, I look at Dean Henderson and just think, come on, lad. A year or two from now, just move him on, because I'm just sick of it, and I'm sick of the ball playing out of the back as well. And I know he bails us out with these fantastic shot stopping saves, but I suppose, and it's just, I suppose it's tough because he's been at United in a very tricky time, but he just bothers me sometimes, truly. He irks me at times, He does make the amazing double saves and all that kind of stuff, and I know I'm asking a lot of him.
Does he still? Is it that we're used to it, and so saves that any other keeper made you would notice for being fantastic, and for him we don't, or is it just because I don't feel like
he very rarely makes mistakes in terms of shot stopping, that lead to goals. But I do think, we've conceded 6 goals from set pieces this year, mainly corners and free kicks, obviously, only bettered by like Norwich or someone on 7, so we're one off the bottom in terms of that particular table, and no one can tell me that that's not in a large part down to De Gea. I'd love to run them all back, because I bet you most of them have been scored quite close to the 6-yard box, if not closer, or in situations where a keeper could have come and punched or could have taken it, and he just doesn't do it. And in the English game, it's a huge issue. Now, obviously there's some marking issue as well, but you would think with Maguire in there, we'd be doing better in that front. But I think that De Gea does have a big part in that. But yes, I agree. I think I think VAR should probably disallow it, but I would be raging if it was disallowed, for me.
And Luca Digne, Everton's main corner taker, may have gone off, but Leighton Baines can deliver a pretty mean one too. Oh, and it's gone in off Victor Lindelof.
They're checking it from a foul point of view. Calvert-Lewin's arm, he might get that. Those Everton fans in the corner and Duncan Ferguson delirious, but it might be taken away from them. It's not.
I've just rewatched it. I agree now. It was a foul.
Yeah.
It was a foul, so I agree with that.
I think if it's in the middle of the park, it's probably given. And if the player goes down holding his head, it's definitely. I think if the head goes down holding his face, I don't even think it goes to VAR. I think the ref blows it up as the ball's trickling over the line, basically.
To be honest, I think De Gea should get some criticism for not going down.
Well, I think that just shows that he wasn't actually fouled, really.
Yeah, he wasn't real. I don't think he was impeded enough. Yeah. And it's one of them where it's actually, to me, I don't think that there is impacted or impeded him enough, else like you say he would have gone down.
No, I think he goes with a weak wrist, and that's it. I think he's scared of getting hit.
For me, it only has to be a foul, because otherwise you're you're kind of setting a precedent that it's okay to put your hands in keeper's face. It's more about, not setting a precedent and opening the floodgates for me, but actually...
It's also because Calvert-Lewin's taken a 4 kind of step run and jump and actually jumping like he wants the ball. Of course his arm's going to be in around to his face when De Gea comes late, jumps under him like a fanny. Of course he's going to end up with his face under Calvert-Lewin's. And I'm not saying that's De Gea's fault. Well, it is De Gea's fault. Not that he got hit in the face, but it's his fault that he made bad decisions and didn't come with any conviction. And
100%.
You get what you pay for. I thought that Lindelof was slightly on his heels with it as well. I don't think it's a huge amount to ask for him to get out of the way of that / clear.
No, I mean...
Because you would expect your keeper to make that punch unless your keeper is David De Gea, right? So for me, there should probably be that awareness from them. I think that stat about the set pieces, one thing that you have to consider to, that tells you even more is that we've only conceded one less than Norwich. We will have conceded a lot less set piece opportunities than Norwich. So the conversion rate on teams scoring against us from set pieces will be much higher than Norwich. We're conceding, almost as many from much fewer chances. And I think it also shows how much we're missing Smalling, because that, in the air and on defending set pieces and actually attacking set pieces, in fairness to Smalling, is one of his greatest strengths, right? And I think we've massively missed him in both boxes, in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Everton's XG was 0.28, I think. Ours was 1.48 or something like that, so we should have had about a goal and a half. They should have had a quarter of a goal or slightly more.
Fuck XG.
But I think that is, it looked like a 0-0, a 1-0 or a 1-1. It never looked like we were going to break out and score any more than that. At 1-0 down, I had no conviction that we were scoring 2 goals today. Absolutely not. I was actually pretty confident we wouldn't even get the equaliser, and I think if not for Greenwood, we wouldn't have. Reece, were you feeling the same way, or what were your thoughts after that goal and then leading up to the Greenwood's obviously fantastic strike?
I thought we'd get a draw out of it just purely because of the fact that we're at home and the, statistically odds based, you'd assume that the home team's somehow gonna get an equaliser, but based on the actual balance of play, I wasn't seeing where the goal was coming from, and it says it all, that finish from Greenwood. It was real eye of the needle, brilliant finish, to get us out of a situation where we didn't look like we were going to score.
The goal was absolutely fantastic. What I thought was really impressive was Greenwood actually picks up the ball first and plays a raking crossfield ball to, I think it was Luke Shaw, and then he gives it to Dan James, who then plays it back to Greenwood further up the pitch. And we basically worked them from side to side. And I think, I could be wrong, but other than a centre-back, I think that was the first kind of crossfield ball that was played, A, on target, B, to any effect in that game. And that's such a standard tactic, particularly when you have 8 people just kind of sitting in and you want to quickly switch from side to side to move everyone across to then come back, and then suddenly you've got a gap for a striker.
Exactly. Try and move that low block around. Yeah. Otherwise, they're just going to stay in the same
20, 30 metres rather than asking each individual player to move someone 5 metres, which is very comfortable for them. So I thought Greenwood deserved a lot of credit for that pass and then to pick it up again. And obviously, the finish was absolutely fantastic. One thing that I was supremely annoyed about more than I think anything else in the game, Alex, was after that goal we had 15 minutes left, I think even before injury time. He scored in the 77th minute or something like that, so you're talking anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes of that match left, and the thing just fizzled out. There was no build up. I was watching it and I said, right, this is us now, we should be completely, I said it at 30 minutes when it was 0 or 1-0, but I said we should be completely penning them in, dominating, creating chances now, ratcheting up the pressure, and this should work out okay, this should be good. And it just didn't. If anything, Everton went and looked the more likely immediately after the goal, and to me that just speaks to the character of this squad and a little bit around the coaching as well. I just thought that was such a good reaction from Everton, but that we allowed them in that situation to just see the game out, creating chances themselves and relatively comfortably without creating a single other chance, really. To me, that is just such a nail in the coffin as well. That was so hard to take.
I think, so you were talking about the XG then, being, I think, 1.48, you said, for us. And for me, one of the things that, speaks to that even further is that we had those 2 chances before Everton's goal where they were actually playing a higher line. So you had a ball from, I think, the one crossfield ball that we had that you hadn't mentioned was Lindelof to Rashford. Fantastic ball.
Well, I said except for centre backs, because I was thinking there was a few tried from the centre backs, and that was a great.
So yeah, great ball. Rashford he ends up taking it somewhat wide. He's not really able to get it properly under control at the pace that it was at, and ends up somewhat spooning it. And then there was a McTominay one putting Dan James behind as well, which he cut across the keeper and sent it wide. So quite a lot of that XG will have actually been before Everton's goal. So just going a goal down, we didn't really create anything or fight. And then, like you said, we managed to get that goal out of nothing, relying on individual brilliance, which in all honesty has been one of the biggest problems with United for the last 6 years, having to rely on some individual brilliance to get us out of a sticky situation. And then we didn't move forward. And there was that telling stat that came up, on the broadcast, which was something like United under Ole when conceding first. I don't know if it was this season or ever, and it was like
1-1, drawn 3, lost 8 or something.
I think it was 12. I think it was 12 losses. And for me, one of the biggest frustrations that I've had with Ole is that when he first came to the club as caretaker, he very much came in with I'm a United legend, and that's why I'm best placed to do this, because I know the expectations that this club sets for itself, and we have a team of players who are capable of challenging, who are this, who are that, and he was very much playing up. And then as soon as he got the job, and as soon as top four became a reality for him, and as soon as there was this longer term play there, for me, he's just completely gone within himself. He's in his shell, and he's been managing expectations consistently throughout. And as part of that is as much his arm around the players and, very much defending the players or putting no focus on the players when things aren't going to plan. And, there were times where Mourinho went too far the other way, and that could be frustrating. But I think to me that says something when the manager's not kicking off about these sort of results and saying that it's not good enough, and he's trying to just we've got a plan. Yeah, we'll it's a long-term plan. then you're just creating this excuse and allowing the players to be not performing
to the standard that we would expect. Yeah,
you do feel that towards the Stretford end, playing that way, it's happened so many times, and today again it happened. And towards the end, I felt we could get another one, but we just ran out of time. And but the belief was there, energy, drive, attitude was there. Just couldn't. Time ticked very, very quickly.
I mean, I've said this a few times on the podcast, and everyone's always said, what he gives out to the media after a match shouldn't be looked at with too much, scrutiny or too much focus. And I disagree. I completely disagree. But honestly, see, after these performances, I am sitting at home, rocking back and forth, waiting for the post-match presser, because it absolutely boils my blood every single time, and today was absolutely no different. He just comes across as deluded, honestly deluded, in these kind of just nonsense things he says after the fact of a poor performance, and he goes so far to avoid any form of criticism on either himself, the team, the decisions, the players, anything, and it's just, he really loses buy-in from me in respect of that. And I suppose that moves on to the next kind of and the final point of this particular pod. It's obviously the 1 year anniversary since he took over. Mourinho was sacked around this time last year, and Ole took the job in a caretaker role. So this year he has one less point than Mourinho had at the point he was sacked. Now, it's slightly different because Ole's only 4 points off fourth, whereas Mourinho I think was 12 or something like that. So obviously the quality was higher in Mourinho's year. And I think that's a big let-off for Ole this year, because we deserve to be absolutely nowhere near fourth. And yet we are. And that's interesting because on a weekend where Spurs looked like they were about to drop points but rescued it, where Arsenal got hammered by City, where Chelsea got surprisingly beat at Bournemouth, we could have been within 2 points of Chelsea. And I would have said, if we had a win today, looking at Watford, looking at wherever else, I'd say, look, we're going to be fourth by Christmas here. Like, I genuinely think that was a potential. It still actually is a potential, which is almost a damning indictment on the entire Premier League. But it can't gloss over the fact that we have been garbage and have a garbage points total given who we've played and the positions we've been in those games. So I suppose the last thing I want to kind of talk about is we're obviously very focused on Ole, and we've spoken about whether it's just the front three's fault for us not being incisive and us not scoring goals. And I suppose it's a similar thing. How much of this is Ole and how much of this is the players, how much of it is the club, how much of it is the ethos within the culture within the club, how much of it is the board, the Glazers, Ed Woodward, etc. So, Raess, how much in modern day football, I suppose, does the manager actually matter? Are we putting too much criticism on Ole for things that he just simply can't control or can't control so quickly? Because that's what a lot of people would tell me. I'm very unsure.
The biggest factor of failure at Manchester United is Ed Woodward, purely because he's put the wrong men in charge time and time again. I think he's given managers a lot of backing, but he's just put faith in the wrong men, and his job is to put the right men in charge. So when you repeatedly fail to do that 4 times in a row, then I'm sorry, you should lose your job as well. Now, going back to Ole, I think he is to blame in the sense that I don't think long term he is up to the job. I know I've been supporting him in the sense that I've said don't get rid of him while he's been getting certain good results, like the Man City Spurs double was enough to keep him in the role for me. But do I see him as a long-term option? No. And people will look at Frank Lampard. We're seeing a lot of posts now on Red Cafe saying, well, Lampard's honeymoon period is over now. He's being exposed, and those who are saying Lampard was this and that versus Ole are now having their mouths shut, etc. But when I look at Chelsea, I see from a coach's perspective, I look at it and I see an impact. I see philosophy of play there. I see players improving. And I can definitely see that team next season hitting the ground running with a few signings and being an established top 4 team, because the way they play, it's really good football. It's just defensively, they're an absolute joke, but that will improve. It's harder to improve attacking play than it is defensive play. Defensive play can improve a lot more easier. Whereas when I look at United, I see a lot of coaching work that needs to go into that team. A lot of coaching work. I see Ole as someone who will short-term potentially maybe get top 4 this season. I do see it happening because I think Chelsea are that inexperienced at the back that it will hurt them. Similarly, Arsenal are an absolute shambles. Spurs are the biggest threat. So, but then again, they're managed by Mourinho, who is getting them short-term results right here, right now. But when I'm looking at the quality of their football, in patches it looks all right, but I still don't think Mourinho's the same Mourinho he was back in the day. So
Sheffield United?
Yeah. So I see United and Spurs as competing for that.
Catch Chelsea, because obviously Chelsea are still very much in the running.
Yeah. But I think Chelsea will probably keep hemorrhaging points. But the Chelsea long-term project is a good project. For me, they should just keep faith in Lampard, whatever comes in terms of results, because next season, if he keeps that same squad together and adds a few players, they're going to be flying next season. Whereas I don't see the same with United. I don't see a long-term successful project here. I just don't.
No. And to be honest, I mean, I would ask people, can you see Solskjaer lifting the Premier League trophy for Manchester United?
No.
I mean, I just can't see a world in which that happens where we don't spend $500 million in the summer. Alex, more specifically, I mean, he has gotten rid of a good amount of players, which I think is a positive step. Even if we're upset that Smalling went versus some of our other drafted centre backs, but I don't think that was anything to do with the board or Ole in terms of decision making. It was just the right thing to let him go, and unfortunate that we can't shift some other dead wood. We have had issues with injuries, but at the same time, we have massively reduced the squad's age. He has, I think, signed well, although the jury is still relatively out, because I do think Aaron Wan-Bissaka, despite being amazing defensively, is extremely lacking going forward. I think Maguire's been okay, but I think he's struggling in a team, and it's not necessarily all his fault. And Daniel James has been great, but there may be limitations there. But for the type of player he was coming to United at that time, I think he can only be deemed quite a big success. So he's bought well. He seems to be getting more out of Rashford, certainly. I would say he has made the right decision with Martial, even if Martial remains very much a mercurial talent. He's had amazing results in the big games. So people point at these things as the green shoots of recovery, that it's just a process, that you simply can't reverse everything in one go, that he needs more transfer windows and more time with the squad and all that kind of stuff. But on a day-to-day level in these matches, why can't he motivate or inspire or instruct his team to be able to break down these smaller times? And why just like last year when we had that great run of fixtures and then crumbled whenever fourth came within any kind of touching distance, do we seem to crack under the kind of pressure of success?
Well, because he hasn't got the tactical nous or the experience or the gravitas or any of the other qualities needed for those things. Essentially, he, got the job because he was a legend and because there was a purple patch of form. And, I said when he was hired last year on this podcast that, Nick asked the question, if Ollie won the Champions League with United, should he be given the job full time? And I said no. And I stand by that because, for me, winning a competition like that can be done on momentum.
Yeah, Di Matteo at Chelsea. Wasn't it Di Matteo?
Exactly. Yeah. And Ollie didn't go on to that anyway. But ultimately, my point was that, a run of results can very much happen off the back of momentum. And momentum is incredibly important in football. But when the momentum's gone, your tactical nous, your general motivation, the gravitas that you have to really go and make a difference, not just on the pitch, but also off the pitch and really challenge the structure that's in place at the club, to really make sure that, the changes that need to be happening to facilitate success are happening, or that if they're not, the people who are in charge are being called out for those failings, something that he hasn't yet done. And ultimately, for me, many people are constantly willing to extend this rope for Ollie, based on nothing but, his history with the club and then these few flagship performances against the big sides, which I appreciate, to many fans mean a lot. But ultimately it's just more rope for him to hang himself with because he's out of his depth. He never should have been given the job in the first place. And for me, all we're doing is we're putting a black mark on his CV, which I think will make it difficult for him to get certain jobs in the future that maybe he might have had the potential with more time and experience to go on to. And I actually think that we're doing him more harm than we are good. It's not really a question about Ollie out because I was never Ollie in, and I think at this point, there's something to be said about the club. If it does believe it's got a plan, at some point you have to see a plan through. Else, what's the point, right? But for me, the plan is clearly the wrong plan, and unfortunately, Ollie is the wrong man, and that's not his fault as such. It's just United is a hell of a big job. Much better, more experienced coaches fail to have success at United. So why would he expect that he should be any different?
Yeah, and I think the reason why I asked the question is even when you take it away from Ollie and just look at football in general and how it's changed, I think slightly the days of a manager like Ferguson who could kind of get through on a network of contacts, of picking the right players based on their kind of character, of building up squads and giving rousing halftime team talks to inspire performances are fading, if not entirely gone. I mean, it's now an elite level sport where tactical analysis and data makes up everything, I think, that the big clubs do. How they set up, how they attack, as we said earlier, in terms of patterns and coaching, how we prepare for teams based on, statistical analysis and all that kind of, how we, provide the players nutrition and physical rest and the PT stuff and everything like that. And it becomes this big, massive thing where I think the structure and the board and the culture of a club matters so much more than this one man who's the quote-unquote manager, when really all he is a head coach these days. Wenger was the last manager in the Premier League. They don't really exist anymore. What you have is a head coach in charge of this kind of conglomerate of players who have their own motivations and their own aspirations, agents, nutritionists, PT staff, data analysis who are going to tell you everything you need to know, and all you have to do is pick the team, send the boys out and do a halftime team talk. I mean, is it just that a manager, are we placing too much on Ole's shoulders? Because I think that's what a lot of people would say, is that we're just constantly making excuses for everyone else, for the structure of the club, for the decision makers, for the players especially, and just foisting it all onto Ole. And I don't particularly want to believe that, because I look at the best clubs and I see what I think are amazing managers, fantastic managers who have single-handedly, I think keyly what you said there, Alex, wrought the changes that they want. I particularly look at Klopp.
Yeah.
And I get great work was happening at Liverpool before he came in. Part of that great work was identifying him. Great work was happening at City before they brought Guardiola in, but they were planning for him 2 years before he came in and building a thing that would make him successful with him in mind. It's that forward planning. And as you say, it could be that we're just in that first European stage. But I just have a very difficult time seeing Ollie as that guy. And I think anyone who wants to take away all of that responsibility from him, it's a bit of a cop-out, I think.
Well, it's a balance, right? Because I don't think anyone's saying that it's all Ollie's fault. Everyone has known, we've been talking on this podcast for years, for at least 2 years now, that there needs to be change brought about in the structure of the club. And that's not even necessarily just a director of football, but there needs to be a clear identity and vision for the club, the style of football that we want to play, the characteristics and the traits that we're looking for in our players. And then we need to be identifying the KPIs that all that data and analytics work that's being done in the background is really focused on. Because ultimately, if we're working towards conflicting metrics and key performance indicators, or we're changing what those indicators look like depending on what coaching staff are in place, then how are you able to ever facilitate that longer term road to success?
Yeah.
And that change clearly needs to be brought about. However, what Ollie's got on paper is still much better than the majority of clubs.
So much, yeah.
And we've got more points against the
top six than the
exactly,
bottom 13. Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, that shows, and you watch us against teams, and this isn't just true of Ollie, I've been thinking this for years now, but you'll see us against someone like Bournemouth, and I'm thinking, why can't we pass like that? You've got these, Sheffield United a few weeks ago, and, a very direct team doing, for the most part, fairly obvious things, apart from the...
Still taking the absolute piss of out
exactly
in terms of their footballing patterns. Yeah.
Exactly. And, clearly, yes, maybe Ollie isn't the root cause. He's definitely not the only problem, but that doesn't mean...
solution either.
Exactly. And, and I think, for me, both sides need to be in place to really facilitate success, unless you do have that generational manager who can really make a difference. But ultimately, even for those generational managers, yeah, I think Clark has gone in and he's made key changes. Yes, there was good work being done, but they were still getting the wrong players in. They still didn't have a clear idea of the sort of football that they wanted to play, the people that they wanted to hire, the mentality that they wanted to remain consistent. As you said, Guardiola, the planning was being done in advance, and the people who were in the business, and essentially football is a business these days, had worked with Guardiola at Barcelona. So, they were able to put in the right measures for him to come in and hit the ground running. And yeah, no one's saying it's all Ollie's fault, but he's definitely, for me, no part of the solution. And, I do think there's potentially a world out there where, he, moves into some other role within the club. But I guess, my problem even then would be that he's too much of a yes man.
I think one of the big things, I said it a few weeks ago and you've reiterated the point, but gravitas to me comes into, there's a huge amount of personality involved in being a Manchester United manager, but also just a top manager. And I don't see it in any way, shape or form, Ollie. And I think that is such a simple thing, but I think it makes such a huge difference, that charisma, that ability to inspire and convey a message.
Yeah.
And I do not think it's there.
For me, it's gravitas and bravery, and I actually think that applies throughout the playing staff as well. Like, for me, one of the things that's lacking is bravery and gravitas. The bravery to make those runs where maybe you won't get the ball, the bravery to make those tackles, the bravery to be one-on-one against your centre back, the bravery to take the ball forward and take accountability and to try things, to continue pushing. That bravery is just lacking throughout the club, from the playing staff to the coaching staff, to make brave decisions in what personnel are on the field, to bravery in the substitutions that you're making, and bravery in the tactics. And bravery and gravitas for me go hand in hand, and we're just not seeing that.
Up next, we have the very brave Colchester in the Football League Cup quarter-final, followed by Watford the following Sunday. So, I mean, two huge games. Obviously want to progress in the League Cup because I think cheap wins are going to be few and far between this season in terms of silverware. And then Watford, I think, takes on a huge significance because, I mean, they are struggling as much as anyone you could pick out at the moment, rooted to the bottom of the Premier League table with 9 points this far in. So,
But surely for us, Watford are basically top of the league. So if we're worse against teams who are worse, the shit the team, the worse we are, right?
Yeah, and that's the big issue because it's just going to frustrate. But Raess, what are you saying from those two games? I mean, 2 wins becomes, I think, just anything less is disaster, I think.
Is the Watford game at home or away?
It's away.
Then it's going to be a tough one because Watford, I've been watching them closely. The results haven't gone their way, but they've actually been playing quite well. Against Liverpool really struggled against Watford. They were set up well. They created a lot of chances, which they didn't put away, but they were looking like a team that's picking up in terms of form and energy. I think it's going to be a similar situation to the Sheffield United game, where they're going to be up for it, and they might even in patches like blow us away with like Delafeu getting a goal and just being on it sort of thing, and then us having to fight our way back into the game. I don't think it's an easy game for us. I really don't.
Typically over the past few years it hasn't been that easy for us, I don't recall. And obviously the League Cup. I mean, Alex, do you think he'll play the youth? I mean, we're into the quarter final now, although it is obviously Colchester and he's going back to back midweek.
He has to go youth.
It's December, he has to, right?
Yeah.
He absolutely has to play the youth, and I think that's part of the way that you can try and refresh things as well, and also help keep the fans on side, right? I think we saw that in the Europa League a few weeks ago. Whatever the result, it becomes...
It's a feel-good factor, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Seeing those younger players, I think that's important, and so yeah, it's going to be Greenwood, Garner, and the rest of the lads, Tuanzebe in there as well, who I should have said earlier, by the way, I definitely should have mentioned as someone who has potential. And, I know a lot of Aston Villa fans who rate him incredibly highly from his time in the Championship last year, which I do think is probably undervalued, and much more credence should be put on that than the one game he had in the Europa League for us this Thursday.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, he has to go with the youth. And I think, that's probably the only reason that I'll watch the game, to see those players.
It's not bad. It's not bad for Alex. Yeah. So what are you saying? Win against Colchester, win against Watford?
Yeah, yeah. Colchester could have penalties written all over it, to be fair. But
yeah, it could.
I'm gonna say a fairly boring but a win. I reckon. Yeah, like 1, maybe 2-0. And Watford, yeah, I agree with Reece. Watford will be tough.
Yeah, they're in desperate need of results, and it just has another disappointing Manchester United
team fighting for their life, potential shit.
And this is the day they turn it around against sleeping giant Manchester United, who just can't seem to turn the corner that we desperately think
we're going around in circles, right? That's why.
I know. Cool. Well, we will definitely be back, I think, after Watford on Sunday. We then have Newcastle and Burnley over the Christmas period, so we'll see about recording sometime during the new year, and also maybe a bit of a transfer special leading into this January transfer window, where we're definitely going to sign in Erling Haaland. But apart from that, it is good evening from me.
It's good evening from me.
And good evening from me.